Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Council 2.0. We're still working on a rebrand. We don't have a name yet. But this is a very special episode. As you can see, Constance is not here. It's just me. I'm terrified, but I'm also very excited. I'm really excited because this is a very special episode. I did some big girl things, and now I have some new friends, and I want you all to meet them. But before we do, I just want to tell everyone why we're all here and what we're going to be doing. This is a very special Hunger Games episode and episodes, because I think this is going to be a little series on the Hunger Games. We're going to start off first with the first book and movie, obviously. But yeah, I'm excited. This is we're deep into the Renaissance. Everyone say thank you to our Lord and Savior, Lucky Lefty. But yeah, so everyone here knows me. Hello, everyone. I'm Natalia. I am the current head of, at least for this episode, of the council. I'm also the co-creator of it. But I would like you all to meet my friends. So here, nameless, we have Quinn.
Hi,
I'm faceless.
I'm Quinn. My front camera's broken, so I will not be able to be here with my face. But yeah, you can just find me on Instagram at quinn.whitmore. I also have a fashion account called Quintessential Allure. So
very capital couture of you.
Right. Thank you.
Up next we have my dear friend Sadie Rose, who I don't think I would be here if it wasn't for her. So hello, Sadie.
Hello, I'm Sadie Rose, and I guess my main account would be on TikTok, Soggy Soy Milk Enthusiast.
Has a different meaning after last night.
Oh. Yeah.
Next up we have Gale. I say that with bitterness, but personally, the one behind the mask I adore.
So. Love for, the person behind the mask. Yes. Hi, my name's Emily. I have been wearing this Gale mask for definitely over like 3 hours today, like as total, but we're sticking with it. I run a real trooper. I run a Hunger Games and Josh Hutcherson edit account on TikTok called Clown City 41. And yeah, you can find me on there pretty much. Just having a good old time. Onwards.
The hand behind the back was a very great Gale pose, by the way.
I was feeling like this before. Yeah. It was really something.
Again, not you, just Gale.
Just Gale.
Just Gale. Yeah. Next up we have our favorite curly Q, like absolute resident curly girl. Kassie. Oh, hello.
I muted myself.
Such silent excitement.
Everybody, listen up. Hi, I'm Kassie. I have a TikTok sillies account, and right now I'm dedicating a lot of my meme stock to Hunger Games. And you can find me on TikTok as Kassie. It's Cozy Kassie May is my TikTok right now. So
I like that you hesitated slightly. You're like, what about you have like 3. So I
do.
You had to think about it. I get that.
Yeah, I'm like, which one is it? Yeah, it's that one. So
yeah.
Yes.
And
happy to be here.
Yes. And last but not least, the one we've waited for. Very happy that they showed up.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Landlords are landlording. This is Rosa.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Rosa, and you can find me on TikTok also at Comrade Orphe. If you find any of my other accounts, please block me because I do not want to be perceived beyond that. Thank you.
Well, great way to start it. Okay, everyone. I'm very excited. I realize that I have not mentioned what exactly we're going to be talking about. Generally it is Hunger Games related, but what I wanted to talk about is, and we'll go around, is the difference between the books and the movies. More specifically, what are our favorite parts of the book that wasn't in the movie, and why that's your favorite part and why you think it was omitted from the movie, and then a reversal of something that was changed from the book for the movie. But yeah, let's get started. Quinn, you're up first, kiddo. Good luck.
Hi. I kind of cheat because I kind of have two, because like one of them is not really my favorite part, but I think it's really vital. And that part for me was when District 11 sent the bread to Katniss. Sorry. Because that was like such a vital scene for me, because it was like one of those times where it was showing the district unity, especially because I think that was like prior to Fresh as well. And I felt like that was such an important part of kind of like building up that idea. And so the reason why they left it out for me, I don't know. They had it in the deleted scenes and then they decided to cut it, which for me, I don't really understand that decision, because it was like a 1 minute scene. So like, I feel like they could have included that. And especially because it plays such it's such an important part for, I think, building up that like whole spark of the revolution, especially like we have that like right after Rue up until like that penultimate moment with Katniss and Peeta and the berries. And so I cannot for the life of me figure out like why they decided that needed the cutting block when they got to editing it. But then the other one was kind of just like my favorite part was, I think, just like more of like Peeta's like dialogue, especially kind of like in those cave scenes. I felt like we got to see a lot more Peeta's personality in those scenes. And I have like guesses for why they would have left that out. I think that they were really like leaning into kind of like really, really differentiating Gale and Peeta, and kind of like leaning into this trope where it's like Peeta is definitely, I think, this like sort of like quintessential nice guy, like sweet guy. And I feel like they really like heavily were like leaning into that. I do think Josh could have done some of those lines that we see Peeta have in the book, because like he's very charming in that. And we see that other times. We saw it in the interview and we see it a lot more, I think, in like Catching Fire. But I think like those two are ones that really, I think, stuck out to me, and was like the things where, especially in my reread, I was like, I wish they would have kept this in, or I wish they would have just like added this, because I feel like they were somewhat of like easy fixes, because I think they had the time for the first scene. And I think like as far as the script writing goes, that was something that I think like they could have just taken right from the book and put it in.
Yeah, those cave scenes were great. And also, you're here to finish me off, sweetheart. Like, all Riz gone from that board.
That line specifically, like, especially when Katniss finds Peeta, like, I was just like, it was so awkward when she finds him and just like comes across him, and he's just there like, Katniss, he like grabs her ankle. Like, that was like borderline like horror. Like,
yeah.
And the music behind it, yeah, you're so right. They nearly almost turned the Hunger Games into a horror.
He's just like, hi.
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 Like,
Let alone
basically-
not even talking about Rock Peter, like not even mentioning the element
Not
of
even-
his makeup and
not
what's
even
going
they
on
were
there.
so great, because like they really just like those lines really, like, we got to see a lot of like Peeta's personality. Like he kind of made his character that much more dimensional. Like he's sweet,
Yeah.
but he's charming. Like has this cute sense of humor. And I think we've seen Josh do that in like countless other movies. So I wish they would have just kept that in.
I mean, considering how much of the script for the first one was like pretty much lining up with what was in the book, like you would have thought
There was active changes. They were betting on I can't get started on this, but
sorry.
yeah, they
Let's move
had it
on.
out for Josh.
Sydney,
They
your
had
turn.
it out for Josh.
Yeah, I think that was definitely trying to really differentiating, drawing that line between, I think, Peeta and Gale, because I think they really like pushed, I think, those like stereotypes. And I think Francis Lawrence, when he came in, he did a good job, I think, of kind of like kind of framing the Peeta that we saw, I think, in the first movie to like the second one, because in the second one, I think Peeta's and like the writing for him definitely like correlated that much better versus the first one.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was just like a script thing or it was like a Gary Ross thing. But I love Gary Ross's other movies, so I don't like
Ocean's 8. Oh, S tier.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's-
Oh my god.
Those are
Yeah.
mine.
I'm a sucker for a good heist.
I know. It's and hot women being hot while doing it. Kate Blanchett.
Mother.
Sadie Rose, it is your turn. Good luck. I wish you well.
Okay.
Good morning, by the way.
Good morning. Yeah, I just woke up, so I'm like a little groggy. Mine's probably pretty similar to Quinn's. I'm probably less picky than most about like the book to movie because I am like a filmmaker, so I try to understand better like the decisions that are being made. Like I don't always agree, but I'm like, okay, I can see like why you did that. So like mine, like overall, every time I watch the movies, I'm always like, Peeta's character's like really cut back. And that's probably like where I'm like most disappointed. I feel like everything else stays pretty true, and the scenes that are cut, I'm like, okay, like I kind of get it. Like it's a little watered down, but it has to be because it's a movie, it's shorter, we can't like pack as much. But like the cave scene could have definitely been longer. And just like with all the movies, like Pete is just like he's in every scene, but he's like not saying anything. Like he's just there.
He's there.
I wish there was more. Like, you know, I think for the dialogue, a lot of book dialogue is like not really how people talk. I don't know, I'm just thinking about this. So a lot of times that has to change between a book to movie, but like the sweetheart thing, like that could have totally been added. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
just my thoughts.
Yeah. There were a couple
No,
of
I'm
sweethearts,
like
but
right
not
there
all
with
of
you,
them.
trying to like keep like that open mind, especially when watching movies, because obviously they have a limited time to do things, and it's like they have to maintain a PG-13 rating. And
Right.
so like I'm always trying to be super understanding of like those different things, like you said. But no, I completely agree with you. Like especially when you have to change the dialogue, because like sometimes it doesn't sound natural at
No,
all.
not at
Or even,
all.
yeah, and so or like it does when you in your head a little bit, but then like when you actually, it's like you go to reread like an
When you like
essay
read it
out
out
or
loud, you're
something,
like, no one
and you're
talks
like,
like
oh no,
that.
it doesn't flow.
Yeah.
Like
But
it works in books, but it doesn't work like when it goes to screen. It's like a really bizarre thing. Like we're okay with reading it, but not like people don't actually talk like that. you
yeah,
know?
It's weird.
it's like I think they like nailed. I think they nailed everything with like the casting and the chemistry between all of the characters, and like it was so like faithful. Like I completely agree with like what you were saying. Like it was just like that disappointment with kind of like the watered down like part where it's like understanding in some areas, and in other areas you're just like, ooh, like we could have done something more. But
Yeah. I also think it's worth mentioning that Suzanne Collins wrote the like helped write the first movie script. Like she didn't help the others. And I think Quinn, to your point, you added that like Gary Ross's direction was so different from Francis Lawrence. So like
yeah,
Francis Lawrence I felt like was way more faithful, whereas like Gary Ross like set up a lot of different things. And unfortunately he did the first movie and there's nothing against him, but like because he did those things, like they had costs later on. Like, you know, you take out like you don't put Peter losing his leg. So then
yeah,
later on that's like it can't be included at all. Like
Mhm.
everything that's not included in that first, it's not going to be included later, unfortunately.
they were definitely benefited from like Suzanne Collins, because like Suzanne Collins, she was involved like in all of the movies. Probably not as, I think like you said the first one, she was involved more heavily. But like I feel like you can like sense that, but also it helps that she wrote the books kind of like exact kind of like with the movie, like the three parts and whatnot, because like she has experience as
Yeah,
a
she has a
screenwriter.
background of being a screenwriter, so that
And I
really
think that
helped with.
helped it so much compared to I think other
Mhm.
adaptations at the time.
Yeah. Great. Good. Okay. Gale. I love you. It's your turn.
All right, it's my turn.
Yes.
So I think that my favorite part, I spoke a little bit about this on the live, but my favorite part of the first book that was removed is basically the entire class divide element of District 12. I understand entirely that they needed to cut down on scenes within District 12, but because they had to, I mean, there was so much in that book in terms of pacing that they just have to keep things moving. I understand that. We lost some great ones to that removal, though. I mean, obviously we
Rip
lost
Madge.
Madge, I'm sure. Rest in peace, Madge. We lost Deli, but also just I think that not including that, it actually takes away quite a bit of because we understand that the capital is trying to divide the districts within the Hunger Games, but that removes our ability to see the impact that it's having on people's interpersonal relationships and just the complete separation within the districts. Like there's not even I'm from District 12, so the people around me at District 12, they're there for me. There's this very large feeling of separation, and I think that contributed to why Katniss couldn't even see herself with Peter for a large part of the start of the Hunger Games, and why she struggled to come to terms with it, because it was he is from an entirely different world to her. There's no, I just don't think that was communicated very well in the movies. I mean, it was entirely removed. And yeah, it just takes away a lot of the political heart of the book from having, this big macro, all right, well, the government is literally killing children in the Hunger Games, to this, okay, here's how that trickles down into what happens in the districts.
Right.
Not a trickle down. Incorrect wording.
I knew what you meant. It trickles down.
Yeah.
You're not
It trickles
wrong. You're
down.
not
You're not
wrong.
wrong. Yay, economics.
Well, and I think also piggybacking that, just the idea of that divide, and you would think, because I've heard people say oh, Katniss's mother married across the wealth gap, so it was probably more normalized for her. Yeah, how well did that go for them? Was that a good example to her about how well that works out? And she always cared about PETA, even if she didn't admit it, so she definitely wouldn't want to subject PETA to anything like her mom would.
Life in the seam.
So yeah, just another thing to add on that I feel like not including that left out that part of the development for them, I think.
Yeah.
No, you go, Em.
Please go ahead. Please
No,
go ahead. Also,
to your point about her holding back her feelings for PETA, there is such a divide, going back and reading that first book where she's like, oh, I didn't realize how much we had in common. She thinks there's such a divide between them, and over the whole series, she slowly realizes that she has stuff in common with PETA, and then stuff in common with people from the career districts, and then people in the capital. They're all the same, and it's this slow progression of realizing we're all under this same system. We might live slightly different lives, but we all are suffering in some ways, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, especially
Oh my
with the
God.
cutting out of Madge, because even when she gets
Yeah.
when she gets the Mockingjay pin, even though we kind of get a glimpse, we get to see the Hob, I think, for the first time in that scene, but even then, if they had sort of kept Madge in, I feel it would have been a great way too to kind of further cement those difference, and I think the classes, especially because it would introduce another character besides PETA who's more of wealth, I mean, as far as wealthy can get within District 12, but who also is kind of with the blonde hair, and blue, she had blonde hair, right? I'm not making that up.
I think so. Madge.
Or was she red?
I actually don't remember.
I don't know.
But even then, or
knows.
even with Deli, when we
Yes.
reference and Mockingjay, but even then, I feel that would have been another great way, I think, to further cement that, because I feel we definitely lose that, especially because a lot of it we get from Katniss's internal dialogue, when she is conversing with Rue, and she's like, oh, things are so different in District 11.
Yeah.
Things are so much more rigid there. I didn't even know that was the case. And so I feel we definitely lost out on that bit. That was
Also,
a good point, Em, to raise. I didn't even that didn't even enter my mind for the first second. That's so good.
Another caveat to add to this is her stylist team.
Yeah.
Even they really push her threshold for seeing how people are affected by the capital. And I think it's when it's most likely in the later books where they're complaining about shrimp shortages and stuff.
That was in Catching Fire. That was I think it was after the victory tour during the prep of the wedding.
And I'm not going to go into details because I know we're focusing on the first book, but the point being is at a certain point she does think Like, you know, if I was living their life, like not having shrimp probably would be the most devastating thing. And
Yeah.
you just really see that evolution of her thought.
That was also like such a good line for her, like when she was thinking about, I think, like the revolution starting as well, like the effects of that from what she, I think, had heard from like that one thing. I think it was like she
Yes.
saw it at like Madge's, like her dad's like kind of like screen or something. Because like that line, like that, even with the bread from District 11, like especially because the bread was so pivotal in catching fire as well, with like the giving of it. Like those are just like those small things where
Yes.
it's like so subtle, and yet it was played such like an important part in kind of like building up to kind of those very like climactic moments. Like those are kind of like those things where they're so small, where it's kind of like it really, I think, like helps with the world building and like the building and the framing of all the events, because it all kind of like adds up. But I mean, you know, it's a movie and they can't always get in everything, especially with like adding certain characters and whatnot. But like with those smaller moments, I feel like that's something I feel like could have easily been added in without adding too much time to the runtime of it all.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, you guys, I love how your mind works.
Oh, your
I'm
mind works.
just going to jump in. Oh, guys, I'm just going to jump onto my favorite part that was added. And I feel like this might be a popular one. I'm sorry, but we can continue to discuss different elements of it. Seneca Crane, the perspective
Here.
of President Snow, and every shot. Okay,
Oh
maybe I
my
narrow it down.
God.
Maybe I narrow it down. Maybe I narrow it down. Okay, every shot that shows. Okay, I only get one. I'm choosing one. The technology like that's shown in amongst the games. I know, like some of it, like, the way it does look pretty 2010s, but I love the fact that you know you get to see just how much like time, money, and resources is being pumped into every single version of these games. It reminds me of a callback. Apologies, this is not in the first book, but that deleted scene from Catching Fire where Plutarch Heavensby goes and chooses one
Yes, and he
case from all of those like hundreds of cases.
And they're just for quells. They're just for
Yes.
quells. They're not even for games themselves. These are like hundreds of like quells that have been thought of.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were a part of the live last night when we talked about it, but we have a little theory we came up with that Gale had her students pitch all the different ideas for the quells. And it's just a little database.
It's a very Gale sort of thing to do.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, 100%.
Yeah, the technology.
So yeah.
I was just going to say, though, the one thing that I really, really loved about like the game maker technology that we got a glimpse of that I thought was so weird, and I'm still just like, is this only movie canon, is how they manifest the mutations in the arena. Because it was out of thin air. It wasn't raising a mutation into the arena. It wasn't releasing them from a cage. It was them having a hologram of a mutation and dropping the link and it manifesting in the arena. Like, how?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that works, but like, yeah, that's like so. But like, I feel like it's so cool to kind of see like with the mutations, like, because like there is like those like when you get to see it, I think first in like the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes with like Gale and like all her different ones, and kind of like comparing that to like the advanced versions I think that we see in the books and whatnot, I think is really cool. But I mean, because the mutations I think were also different in the movie a little bit, and that they didn't look like,
They didn't like look like Glimmer.
Yeah. But like it was the eyes part I think that always stuck out, because like that was like the one thing that was like it looked like the eyes of like the people. So like I don't even want to think about like how they managed that, because like obviously they had all of that after they had collected all, because like I don't know, it wasn't really them, but then at the same time with the eye part I was like, ugh.
Yeah.
No, and then like how they treat tributes bodies in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it kind of reinforces like, yeah, it seems like they would mutilate and do whatever they wanted to them.
Tributes and also Clemmy.
And also Clemmy, their own.
Clemmy,
you know?
No.
Yes, all the mutations, but also again, how we all know that I like to do math when I wash my hair. on the Jabberjays for, I know that we're in the first book. We can't really talk about the mutations in the first one, at least for the first movie, because they didn't really like go hard on it. Because I feel like the timeline for them to try and do those mutations like that, they had a week to try and get like some sort of thing with those kinds of mutations for the first book. For the Jabberjays in Catching Fire, they had maybe like 3 or 4 months from when it was announced in like April to July, because they had all of the information of all of these past possible tributes, and then from there it just went on to checking off a list as to who would go.
The thing is that like if they're always listening, like then if they're like right, if they're always listening, right, then like I don't, because I guess it's like been always alluded to, then if we have that in mind, then like I went like it probably was so easy to kind of take from that, like from just like conversation. I mean, I don't know if they're listening on every conversation, because it's not like it's like,
I mean, considering that Snow literally in Catching Fire was like, I know about the kiss. Probably.
Yeah, like,
In the woods too.
Yeah.
In the woods.
Hello.
This is Simon. He was screaming to be let out and join the party.
Free me, Kassie. Curly Q. It is
Awesome.
your turn. Good luck. I believe in you. Make good choices. Maybe it'll be just the same thing that we've already said. Who knows?
Well, yeah. I mean, I also, something that I feel like was weird that they cut out of the movies was they cut out so many like side characters. Like so many. Like they got rid of Peeta's dad. We didn't get Mr. Millard. We didn't
Or
get
his
Billy. We
cookies.
didn't get or his cookies. Like there were some things that they took out, and like also I feel like they didn't really like show like Katniss's relationship with her dad very well. Like how special he was to her. Yeah, like and
we
like
didn't even get like a flashback with him. It's
That
just
is
that
such
She
a good
talks
point.
about him all the time, and he's like never mentioned.
yeah, like how special he was to her, and how special like he's the reason she cares about music, and that all that kind of stuff, and we didn't get that, and it also hurt like Peeta and Katniss's relationship, because then they had to come up with some other reason why Peeta would have ever like noticed her. And they didn't come up with a very good one, in my opinion. They were just like, oh, like I just watched you every day. Like
literally that.
yeah.
stop.
Like they did like the photo, but like they did flashbacks. So like I feel like it would have made more sense if they did a flashback, especially like with like
Little
the plants
baby
and stuff. Like if they
Katniss.
would have done like a flashback with her dad, like teaching her about the plants, I feel like that could have been something that was like, even if it wasn't like dialogue based, but like if they could have just added like a little snippet of that in, like I would have much rather had that than like that really extended, like because like you had the very very long extended version of like her dream with the with the hallucination, which I mean like wasn't bad, but I feel like it was like if they would have like taken a little bit of time from that, and like a little bit of time from like other parts, like they could have done a cute little like back scene. But I mean, again, like still kind of difficult, there's not a lot of time, but like yeah, exactly like Kassie said, like with her dad, like there could have been just like they needed a little bit more.
I feel like in general, they didn't really represent that void he left, because they just kind of presented.
They focused on like Mrs. Everdeen.
Yeah, exactly. They presented Prim, Katniss, and Mrs. Everdeen as like a family unit. And yeah, they were, but like they were one that had a big hole in between them. And I just feel like that didn't come across on screen.
I feel like that one line that Mr. Everdeen had of, if you can find yourself, you can always like live. Like that line is so perfect. Like the only way that line could have been done in that movie is if there was a flashback, if Gary Ross was brave enough. But there was no other way that line could have been put into that film if it was said by literally anyone else. If it was said by Katniss, I was like, we'd be going deep into narration, and there was no Katniss route in that arena, so I was very, very much annoyed.
Yeah, that and like I didn't like how there were just certain little things that they changed, like another thing that I didn't like was how in the books, like it was Haymitch and Cinna who were like, okay, we're making Katniss and Peeta look like a couple.
Mhm.
Like, and in the movie, they made it seem like he
It
like
was
was
organic.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like in the movie, they made it like in the tribute parade when in the book Cinna tells them to hold hands, but in the movie, like Peeta grabs her
Peeta's
hand
like,
and
"Do
like
it,
she
they'll love
tries
it."
not to. Yeah,
Right.
and he's like, no, do it. And
They'll
then
love
like
it.
yeah, and I thought that was like they're just like those little things that I was like, why did you guys do that to his character?
Like-
I don't understand.
Cinna and Haymitch were so instrumental in the creation of them as a unit. Like, what? Cinna, just tell them to hold hands. That's it. Anyway.
That was so
Yeah.
important too. Like it wasn't like making them necessarily a couple at first, but like showing them as a united front
Right.
when that's like
Yes.
not common. Like it like had nothing to do with them being like a potential like star-crossed lovers. It was about like they're going into this arena and you're presenting them as enemies, but we're gonna present them as friends. Like they're
Yeah.
united.
Already allied. I have a question because I don't remember this if it was in the book or not. In the books, do the tributes have different costumes for the tribute parade, or are they more like how it was in the movies as like kind of copy paste of each other?
It's not like the other costumes aren't really
I know that they're not like mentioned.
described well, but I think they're slightly different based on gender.
Mhm.
They do
But-
seem
Yeah.
to like emphasize the fact that Katniss and Peeta's are similar, and the fact that Katniss makes note of that, I feel like
Yeah.
implies that usually there are at least some
Some.
major differences.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
from I think like the point is always that they're like trying to tell the story of the district or whatever with the costumes.
I think there was the most unique thing I think that was pointed out was the almost kind of like the symmetry within their interview outfits with
Mhm.
like the suit
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
flames and stuff like that.
You're
I think that was the one that was I think like the most where it was kind of like where like we kind of saw that more, but
Yeah,
which I thought was such a good touch.
And in the movie too, we got to see that very clear visual difference between everyone else.
Yeah.
Glimmer had this really cute little blush pink little dress. Marvel was very clearly in like blues, and there was like a stripe of yellow or something. Clove had more of a coral, very long. Cato was very basic, kind of midnight blue. Rue was also blue, very kind
Rue's
of like a
little
little
dress was
princess.
So cute.
So adorable.
Both of her dresses were great in both the book and the movie.
I know, they really
Yeah.
undersold her.
Yeah. And Thresh was very toned down. Like, again, always Cinna was making those two a united front.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cinna and
Yeah.
Portia. And Portia. We have to
Yeah.
mention Portia.
Love her
Yeah,
top.
who is actually in the movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think she gets
She
one
doesn't-
line.
Yeah.
And it's ADR, so it doesn't really, does it count? Sure. Yeah. Sadie is
Yes.
sorry, Kassie. I'm gonna say Kassie.
Well,
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
looking at Sadie and then I said,
Oh no problem. So yeah, that's like my biggest thing that I didn't like that the movies did was like just kind of getting rid of a lot of characters. And I mean, like, I think I understand like getting rid of certain like parts of movies, but like it just felt like they really watered down a lot of the characters, especially like yeah, like Katniss's even like in the cave scene when we see Katniss talking about things that are like important to her. Like we didn't get that, and I would have liked that a lot. Or, you know, all the just like the whole cave scene,
mhm.
just all that. I did really like what everybody else was saying, like when they show outside of the arena. So like showing like the interviews. It would have actually no, it wouldn't have been cool. I was like, it would have been kind of cool to see like the interviews of them back home. Because they talk about it in the books.
No.
I would have liked it. I would have liked it. I would have liked it.
What, the final 8, right?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Final 8, yeah.
because like it would have been interesting to see them then like be like, this is Katniss's cousin Gale. This is not like
They're not
it
together.
would it would have been funny to see that, but instead of just like showing him looking sad every time they kiss, like yeah, that I really liked them showing like Caesar talking about like, oh, these are tracker
Oh
jackets.
yeah,
Like
I
stuff
was
like that. I
literally
that was
writing that down to mention as
Yes.
you said that.
The only
yeah.
thing I didn't get was it when Katniss had the hallucination and then she had Caesar there. That to me was the only part where I was like, she wouldn't be hearing that though. But I guess
She
it was just
would
her
not,
mind
yeah.
filling it in. So I'm just
Yeah.
like, that's just like a nitpicky.
That must have been
cool
something
movie
that
thing.
Caesar said in like a
Though.
past games when Tracker Jacker showed up one time.
Yeah.
Like that's
I would
if anything, that's how.
Yeah.
'Cause I felt like, to me, when I was watching it, I wasn't thinking like, oh, Katniss is hearing it. I was more like, this is a cinematic choice to like help us
Yeah.
feel like Katniss is
Mhm.
feeling right now.
I think it's because I was
That's how
watching
I-
the movie. I think it was because I was watching the movie right as I was doing the reread of the first book.
Right.
Mm. I just thought of this, like, also, did they got rid of like, you know how in the books Rue like uses the leaves to like treat PETA because she learned that from like and then Katniss uses that on PETA that she learned from Rue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I kind of they didn't really show that when she was like
No.
healing him, and that would have been really cool.
He was
'cause
just
that was like
suffering
another
with that
thing.
medicine and that soup.
Am I
Yeah,
frozen for you guys, by the way? I'm frozen.
Mm-mm.
no.
Okay. All right. As long as, as long as you can see me, I guess. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, they got rid of that, and it was weird because it would have been another thing to show like that her learning from people in the other districts and like using it in the games. But yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Whoa. They were like back to back. You good?
Yeah, I pretty much always sneeze in threes.
Okay. That's interesting. Consistency.
Health, beauty, wealth.
Consistent.
Yes. As my grandma always says, she goes from salud, which is just health,
Yeah.
and then she's like, Jesus te ayude. Jesus will help you.
Uh,
I don't know how the hell those two correlate, but I guess. Rosa, it's your turn, kiddo.
Cool. Yeah. So obviously loved all the things that people mentioned earlier. The one thing, and I don't know, Quinn, if you said this as something you wish that they had kept in, but I think you referenced it. But one thing I really wish that they had included in general was Katniss's like day before the reaping and her time spent at the Hob, because I felt like all of that was really crucial to understanding like her place in the district, and also just like really establishing that she is like someone that will be missed and that has people that rely on her and is like this fundamental piece in this community, because I just feel like it very much so the movie, if you're watching for the first time without any context, it's more of like a girl that's plucked from obscurity and thrown into this world. And that's just simply not the case with her. Like, no, it's not a chosen one story, but I just feel like there's something that was missing by cutting that part out, personally speaking.
And she's like so important to the continuation of the success of the Hob because of her use of the game that she brings in. It's just I think that line that PETA has where it's like she doesn't know the
Yes.
what was it?
Effect.
She doesn't know the effect she
yeah,
has on
she can
people.
have. She has such a Katniss doesn't think of herself as being someone of great value or importance. She kind of just feels like people are just being nice to her because of the lineage that she has with her father and those sort of pre-made connections.
Right.
But she is so vital to the continuation of not only the success of the Hob, but also to the success of like the like I guess like the morale of District 12.
Literally, yes. And
Especially as someone from like the seam. Like
Yeah.
that's a seam girl. This is not someone from the merchant class just going into the woods willy-nilly and going to hunt just because like I'm not gonna get in trouble. This child is sacrificing her life every single day so then you all can continue to also keep our black market afloat. Like I love her. I love her.
I kind of like loved like that, but I also loved like how like Rue was like, it was kind of like Rue reminded Katniss of Prim, but like while reading it, Rue also, but like when reading that, Rue reminded me a lot of Katniss in a lot of ways, kind of
She
like
is
taking on that like caretaker
total
sort of
breadwinner.
like
older
role, like kind of
scholars,
like
she takes care of all their siblings. Like
Yeah.
she definitely saw both parts of herself, the most vulnerable parts of both herself and Prim in Rue, I feel like.
Yeah. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, there was something else I was just about to say. And oh no, I just feel like that Hob scene would have been so many ways to tie in like a lot of the things that we were even just talking about. Like it could help tie in stuff with other characters that were cut out, tie in stuff with her dad, tie in the Mockingjay because
Literally.
like if they're gonna cut Madge, like maybe at least like tell the significance of a Mockingjay when you're just picking up the pin while you're there or something like that. Because isn't
Thank
that how
you,
it works in the
discount
movie?
Greasy say.
Yeah, like I don't know. There was just so many things that a 10-minute scene at the Hob could have covered.
Okay, you just sparked something in me. It's kind of like a tangent, but like something that kind of irks me about the movies is the pin has an arrow in it. Like I know that's the cover of the book,
Yeah.
but like why would that?
Why did it have an arrow?
Why did it have an arrow? Like what? I don't know. Like it's just like such like a small detail that like kind of bugs me. Like
It-
why would it?
Does it have an arrow in
Is
the
it?
book?
In the
Or is it just the
movie,
Mockingjay
no,
itself?
It's just like
the circle with a bird, and then she looks closer and she realizes it's a Mockingjay.
I guess because the covers look different now, right? Like my cover of the book now, because I got the paperback like off Amazon when it was on sale, because I had to reorder them because like all my books are back in the US. So like mine
Yeah.
has like the Mockingjay. Yeah, the Mocking did like what?
like I
Was
get
it not
like
described
why
like
this
that?
was
Canon
on. I get why it was on the cover of this book. Like I get the significance and the design for the book cover, but for the pin itself, this makes no sense. Why did you
No.
add the arrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, the arrow is not part of the original pin for sure. In general, I feel like
Sorry.
no,
Yeah.
you're right. The pin, they
That
did the
makes
pin
sense, yeah.
dirty, like start to
Yeah.
finish. Like it was such a significant piece. And the pin ended up having a story arc. And we never hear a word about the pin. Like the most
We also never got to see like that's more catching fire, but like we never got to see like the cat like when they like literally like turned it into like a fashion
The
statement too.
freaky, oh my god.
And that
And
was,
the
like,
freaking
so, like-
pocket watch. I will never shut up about that
Imagine-
stupid pocket watch.
Imagine like Snow who like from the start has always been like I hate Mockingjays, and he's seeing like people in the Capitol wearing them everywhere, and it's like he's just surrounded on
The
like all
closest
fronts.
thing that we get to that is the most perfect scene like of him and his granddaughter with the braid. That's the
Yeah.
only connection that we have, not the actual symbol of her token. Like that's what people took away. People didn't take away the fact that she wore a braid. I mean, they did, but not to the same level of the Mockingjay itself.
No.
Yeah. And it loses that tie back to Lucy Gray. And unfortunately, it looks like Lucy Gray will not be wearing braids at any point.
Lucy Gray has no braids. Lucy Gray has snakes.
She wears it in
She has no
braids at
Mockingjays.
a few times, but like if you're gonna do the braid thing, then you have to do it in like the prequel too. I don't know, nitpicky, but
Hey, we can nitpick all we want when the movie comes out.
Right. But no, the other things I really missed or wish that they had, of course, the anything with her father, because it's just so frustrating how much she talks about him and how little he's even mentioned in the movies. Because it's just constantly like anytime she's in her thoughts and trying to is maybe escape, dissociate, just think about something else for a while. Like she's always brought back to, if not Prim, then her dad. And it's just I feel like in general, the story with Katniss and her parents is a really good story. And I just feel like the movie didn't do it justice.
I mean, as M said, the lack of the film not having any clear class divide from
Yeah.
merchant to seam, like that.
Yeah. And then the stylist team. I wish they had the stylist team.
Oh yes.
I just loved them. I loved
great.
watching them evolve, and because they never had a tribute come back. They were
Yeah.
always with District 12, and I think that with Effie too, of just their callousness.
Finally succeeding.
Yeah, and also just like they think, oh, well, now that we've won, like this is it. We get to flounce around. And then they look over and they're like, oh my God, Katniss and Peeta, I can't believe you went through that. Like it breaks my heart because I care about you. And then they start to think about it a little bit more critically. Uh, which I don't know, that's just something I always thought was interesting with them.
Is it my turn now? I think it's my
Oh,
turn.
I think I just have to
Oh,
say the movies did include.
Oh no, we're not doing that yet.
Yeah, we're
Oh,
doing
we're not?
No.
Oh, M just
We're
gave
just-
her so keep leaving. Right. Sorry. Continue.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mine is book that wasn't in the movie, but it wasn't a deleted scene, and everyone else has said it. But I wrote a whole lot of notes, and M has read these notes, and I feel like if I don't say them, then it'll all be for naught. Which is, of course, District 11 bread.
Yes.
I was writing this after the live, and I just the bread as a symbol in this whole series is just, it is like, okay, I'm just gonna read what I wrote. Bread is a connecting factor throughout Katniss's life in relation to death. She was nearly dead when Peeta threw the bread to her, and Rue just died when District 11 sent the bread. Both are selfless acts done by the goodness of people in the hope that survival continues. Both carry extraordinary weight to Katniss as someone who is constantly telling herself that she owes anyone XYZ for something that they did selflessly with no thanks needed. District 11 sending the bread was their thanks for giving Rue a proper goodbye and not making her death a spectacle. It was also the first time where we get an outside look of the connectivity between the districts outside of the games, even though the bread was presented inside and the act was done during the games. It was the only time that connection could have been done during a countrywide, current and constant continual suffering. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
You nailed it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. And why do I think it? Oh,
Sorry.
Yes, and why do I think it was omitted? Because it was, I mean, it was in a deleted scene, but like they still cut it for the movie. They literally, it could have been put in.
It was such a short deleted scene.
was
Like
so
it really wouldn't
tiny.
have affected the runtime either. Like
It's less than 2 minutes.
It's literally, yes, and even from the thing, from the paper that they said, it was like for the generosity and thanks of District 11. Like, oh, that's it. That's all you needed.
Like you had it, and it.
Yeah.
I will never understand that decision.
I know. The way that I thought of it was like, it wasn't, God damn it. The way that I thought of it, it was like, it wasn't like it was like a small detail, big picture sort of thing. I don't think it would have really hit as strongly in like a kind of visual medium, whereas they ended up having, instead of that, they had the riot. But it was Katniss thinking about that piece of bread and like the exorbitant amount of money that would have costed for that one extremely poor district, and her going back on the difficulty of that, and again owing a district, but also how grateful she was on it not even being from a district that is her own. Again, the connectivity.
And also, it's a poor district.
It's a poor district.
At that point in the games, like to be able to buy something to
that
give
late in
to
the game,
it's
like,
so expensive too.
Yeah.
So like you have to imagine that like everybody from that community was really like contributing to getting that for her. because she has like, because Rue played such an instrumental part in, I think, like, within their community, like with the workers and kind of like doing the signaling and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
but I mean, I did like to see like how we got to see the reaction from District 11.
Yeah, I love the riot too, because it was very much this was the first instance that we saw of like truly a rebellion beginning.
And it was such like a monumental and like emotional scene, because like you have that, you have the music,
score.
like the score that was going on in the background. Like, I mean, that was such a beautiful and I think like well done scene. It's like probably one of my favorites, I think, from within the movie, just because I think it had such like a strong impact when you watch it.
And okay, let's like for real start in earnest. Quinn, your turn. Redo it of your favorite part of the movie that was changed from the book.
Yes, I had like two, but like, so one of them, which you talked about, was the whole capital perspective, which is something I really loved, because obviously we don't really get that in the book, besides Katniss's surmising of what's going on when she's in the arena. But like, I loved how we kind of got to see with the game makers, the decisions of like, oh, she's getting too close to the edge, we'll move her in, which we kind of got that in the book, but like to actually see it from like that whole capital perspective, I think was great. Obviously we had the whole riot, District 11, which we saw, which is amazing, but I loved how we got to kind of see like the decision making behind the whole, we're gonna let two partners, win, like two, like the people from the district, like two people from the same district, win. And I think that that was really great. But then, which we talked about earlier when I was redoing this, is obviously Snow's scenes, and specifically the garden scene with Seneca, which I think was just so well done. I like that scene, like whenever I rewatch it, it kind of gives me like chills, the way he's like referencing with like the underdogs and like, do you know why that like we do what we do? And I feel like it kind of just adds sort of like this like very like menacing thing, but it also kind of really aligns with the way that he's described in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, about stuff like where he's just like, he'll watch and then right at the right moment he'll kind of step in and he'll kind of say like, he'll sort of like intervene and he'll say what's on his mind. And then it's kind of like, if you don't listen to him, and that like when he like is first mentioning it to you, if you don't kind of listen to that like sort of like warning, like threat that's kind of like raised within a very sort of like stoic kind of calm way, that's even more chilling, I feel like, than if you were to just sort of state it outright as a threat. Like if you don't listen to that, then obviously you're going to end up exactly like Seneca, or like exactly kind of, I think, how we saw like Sejanus, or like how any of like the other people who like kind of crossed him at any point and like kind of made a threat to him, how they all ended up. And I think that that was kind of just like one of those moments where like I think we really got to see Snow in a way that we didn't really get, at least not in that really first book, because we only see him through Katniss's interactions, and otherwise he's kind of just like this more looming kind of like omniscient kind of like person. We don't really get to know him all that much. And even within the series, like the film series, we still don't get to know him as much, especially not to the extent of like the ballad, Songbirds and Snakes. But I feel like that scene in itself was like one of my favorites. And then the other one, which I feel like is contentious, but like I guess because like they decided they weren't going to go with Peeta's whole like leg injury and stuff. I did like how they kind of shortened Cato's death, and had Katniss do that mercy kill a lot earlier. That idea, like out of like pity, and kind of like Cato's little speech beforehand, I thought was really interesting. I feel like because we didn't get that in the book, but I thought it was such an interesting thing to add, and it kind of added more to his character. Which I think is funny because I feel like we talked about like how they watered down a lot of other characters, but I feel like the one thing they did really, really well was they did all the other tributes, personalities, a lot of justice. And I really, really liked that. And kind of like cementing that idea that like, hey, like these are still all just like kids, like, and at the end of the day, like they may be doing like the hands-on killing within this arena, but like we know who is really behind all of this. Like, and it's not the kids, it's the capital. But I feel like that like moment was like one of those things where we really got to see it from sort of the perspective, especially somebody from a career who is like a career tribute as well. And I thought that was like really fascinating to see.
I agree. And I think it was like a good translation from the book of Katniss does make these observations. She does come to this realization, but obviously they can't just transcribe her narration. So I do,
would be
I
boring.
agree. I like the changes that they made. I think compensated for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did want to chime in about something when you were talking about Seneca Crane. You weren't there last night, but Dove, our mutual at Dove Makes on TikTok, was talking about how Seneca and Arachne from the prequel Cranes, both of them Cranes, both die due to misunderstanding the purpose of the game.
Yes.
And that was something that just like, oh my God, like I had never drawn that parallel before, especially because like Seneca's Crane, we know that he dies because of the result of the games, but we don't understand the fact that it was because because it was
fun
misunderstanding.
For him, it was a story. It was it was purely
entertainment. It was
but
nothing
not
political.
kind of like it wasn't the eternal war for him. It was like it was this. It was just like this, like entertainment. That's like
that's the same with
totally.
Arachne.
Yeah,
and just like how incredible
she's like toying with the stupid that sandwich.
No, and it well, I don't know if we're going to talk about the question in the comments.
No, not yet.
It ties back to that as well, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
I loved it. Anyways.
It was great. Dove has such a big, beautiful brain.
Yeah.
I love it.
Who is next? Sadie, you're next? Yes.
Okay. I apologize. I have quite a few, but okay. I'll start with like small things. Like I really like that there's notes with like the sponsor gifts. I feel like it makes the mentors more important in the games, like because then they're working together while the game is going on. And I liked that we got to see Haymitch's character through that, like the way they like kind of talk to each other.
You call that
yes.
a kiss.
Yeah, that was so good.
Yeah, I love that. I like Effie's character being more included throughout the whole series. I love Elizabeth Banks, and I love that she like went for that. And Effie became like such an iconic character because of that.
And we got the iconic line.
Yes.
Mahogany.
I love the scene with like Haymitch and like the Capitol people, like you mentioned. But I would say my two favorite is the District 11 uprising that we get to see, because I think it's really important that they included that, because it's not just Katniss pulling out the berries at the end. It's the combination of the berries and her highlighting Rue's death, like respecting her in death. The combination of those two that like builds it to a rebellion, whereas like Haymitch like didn't respect the games, and that's all he did. But like Katniss, like she didn't respect the games with the berries, but she also like had this respect for people in the district. She became this voice for the people in the districts, whereas like Haymitch just came across like kind of like, oh, I just don't care. Yeah. So that's like the difference
being
between
16.
Like, everyone else and like what she does. And I think that is like such an important moment. And then like Quinn said, I love Seneca and Snow's conversation. And I think it really drives home like the point that this is not a story that's going to be about the games. It's going to be about something bigger. And like it really highlights the importance of what's actually going on here. And it builds up Snow as like this villain. Like he's not like this person who's alluded to, because at the end of the story, it does become between like Katniss and Snow, and they're like watching each other and they're like constantly obsessed with each other, that they in the end like forget like what's actually going on, and it leads to like unfortunate consequences for both of them. So yeah.
Big brain, Sadie Rose.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, especially because like I love what you said with the Haymitch with like the notes too, because it's like we don't get Katniss's internal sort of like dialogue or monologue, like we like the way that they were able to like still kind of like maintain a little bit of that conversation back and forth through the note and the tribute gift, I think was really great. Especially, and like I loved that like we got to see that, and I loved how we were kind of able to see that again, that connection, but like later on and like the end of Mockingjay with the look they give each other too, with like coin and the voting thing for the games.
Yes. And people overlook that so often.
We're not on Mockingjay, people.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. I felt like I had to like include that because it's like that linkage between them and the way that they think and the way that they kind of communicate within their stares. Like I think like Sadie even made a video on this, kind of like a lot of the Hunger Games and the films exist within silences. And I loved that interpretation because that's also, I think, a trend too within just the novels themselves. Like everything, like a lot of the important stuff happens within the mind, within like those within stares and not
Yes.
words. And it's so great. I
And
see
with
you.
her realizing the ways that she's alike with people.
Yes.
Like she's like, we are alike in this way, so I know that our motivations are the same in this way. So I know that this is most likely how they're feeling right now, and that's just
Yeah.
that's just something that doesn't translate well to film necessarily.
I see you. Yeah.
Sorry, host, go ahead.
Thanks. I realize Emma's not here, but I think she would love this, which is, this is actually not a favorite thing. This is something that I dislike from the movies. And it's okay, Ross's fault, which is blonde Haymitch.
Yeah.
It's
Because
literally a wig.
especially, I know, that man is bald as hell. Make him, anyway.
It's so frustrating.
I know I literally just said don't talk about Mockingjay, but that last scene, like, it would have culminated into the most perfect thing ever if Haymitch actually looked like he was from the seam. And like, oh my god, it's so irritating because Gary Ross did not do this where we could actually like see the divide between the merchant class and those in the seam with like the interdistrict, not even interdistrict, but like between the districts, but also within the district class divide. Like having Katniss and having Haymitch as being both seam victors. Peeta is the only victor from District 12 to be from the merchant class. Katniss, Haymitch, and Lucy Gray to an extent are all seam victors. And having that be the through line between their connection and their constant suffering from Snow generally, the capital specifically, and its power, it's just like, it's so irritating. This one little detail of the color of that wig would have made such a massive difference on how these two characters who grew up with very similar class backgrounds would have interacted with each other and would have understood each other's pain.
I want to, because this entered my mind, and I want to say it before I forget, but like something I wish, because like I feel like they probably couldn't have added this in really. I feel like because like, but I wish we really had gotten somehow like Katniss's reaction to Thresh's death. Because like for me, what really it stuck out to me, especially with the way it was written, because she called it a murder, and I feel like up until that point, except with Rue, she had never really used that term before, but I feel like murder especially is such an intentional term as well that she used, because like she was like, I didn't want Thresh to die, like, and I feel like that was like, and she said it in her mind, and that was something like, obviously I feel like without the internal dialogue, that was something she obviously couldn't voice aloud because they're obviously being recorded,
all on camera.
So
they're on camera.
but I feel like that was just something where I was just like, where it was like one of those things where it was like, I get why they couldn't have like really included that, but I feel like even the reaction in the movie was very brief. It was just like, oh, like I think like
another name in the sky.
It was just like
there was no weight to it.
He's gone. He was just like,
there was no weight to it.
He's like, I
guess
guess Thresh is out. I think like the line uses just, I think Thresh is out. Like Thresh. I think Thresh is out, and I think like that was it. And I was just like, whoa.
Boo.
No, and especially you know, her inner monologue when she's telling Peeta about how Thresh let her go, and just her inner monologue of like, Peeta wouldn't understand this because this is something like only people like Thresh and I understand, of not wanting to owe someone something. And I feel like that's just something that would be really difficult for them to transfer on film. So I understand why they did it. But it was something that I also felt like was missing from her reaction around Thresh and everything.
So I like wanted to include that because it was like on my mind, but like that, but also like Sadie Rose's, all of your like things that they did. So like get literally yes to like every single one. Like so good.
No.
Thank you.
Kassie, your turn.
Yeah, I agree with everybody saying like the stuff that they added in that was outside of the game
that we liked. This is a favorite.
Yes.
I know that I made it bogged down with the wig, but still.
Yeah, the things that they added in that are outside of the games, like they just added that context, and I think it did a really good job of like filling in those spaces that Katniss's inner monologue couldn't fill in. So like helping us understand more of like the districts like being divided and all of that kind of stuff. I really liked that. And yeah, I just agree with everything that Sadie said, like Effie's character having more screen time because she was great. That was one of those ones where I read the book and Effie didn't like super stick out to me, but because of the movies, she does. Like I think that she's a great character because of the movies.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Elizabeth Banks.
We don't
killed
need
it.
Fulvia
Yeah.
Cardew, and that was the best
She
change
did
that was
it.
ever made.
Oh yeah. Yeah, she did great and I really liked that. I guess those are things that I really liked that I can think of right now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Rosa, your turn.
Okay, so Curse of Going Last.
Hey, I'm last.
Mostly everyone has already said all the things that I really love. The District 11 riot, all the stuff that's going on outside of the arena, all the other things, Kato's monologue, all those things I also really loved. A couple of things that aren't necessarily things that they included that aren't in the book, but rather like we were talking about, their way of interpreting Katniss's inner monologues is how she always talked about like there are always cameras, they're always watching, and we knew that to be true, but it really came through. I feel like they could have just like shown the cameras, right? They could have just done that, but they went one step further of showing like the game makers in the room and them being like, hold the cannons and like waiting on bated breath. So I just thought that element of it was really interesting to show like they really are like being monitored, live streamed, nonstop all the time. Something that they did that I actually think that they dropped the ball on, but I still like that they did it, was including interviews from the other tributes. And I had read somewhere, I might be incorrect, that they let those kids improvise that.
Yeah, they let them. Yeah, and it kind of came
it
through.
did not work.
They're kids.
Well-
They're kids. And some of these characters are supposed to have been trained for this moment. So
Marvel's
Kato,
they
like,
could have done
they
so much
used
with
the
it. If you were
Katos,
going
but
Kato's was
if you were
great.
going to include that, like you should have just scripted it. Like
Yeah.
I understand they wanted to be like, these are kids, like let's see what happens if they improvise, but these are not kids from our world.
They
like some of them have been rehearsing this in their brain for years. Like
Yeah.
it's not improvised for them necessarily. So I don't know. That's something that I liked that they included, but I still think they kind of dropped the ball on.
Marvel's annoyed the hell out of me. I mean, again,
I-
I just watched like the deleted scenes,
yeah,
and it was like my dad was a hunter. I'm like, dude, you are from District 1. Your dad's probably making
I
jewelry.
watched-
Right.
Like
I remember watching Kato's ones, and that one, like, there was a point where you could just tell. I think that he was kind of like losing kind of where he was at for a bit because he was just like, I'm ready, I'm like good to
it's
go.
like, you're
I
not
was
filling
like-
up this 3-minute mark, kid.
That was something I forgot about because of the movies was like Katniss didn't even know everybody's name
Mm-hmm.
until she was in the games.
Well,
Like
even
because
with like Marvel, she didn't learn his name until the Victory Tour.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like because
Yeah.
I remember I thought it was so funny. She's like in the tree hiding, like trying to escape the careers, and they go, Glimmer, do this, and she's like, oh my god,
What a
that
stupid
name's so
name.
bad.
Give
Like,
their children.
yeah, as they're trying to kill her, she's like, oh my god, that name is so bad. Like
So
I just
funny.
thought that was so funny.
And then I think my last thing, well, I also talked about it earlier, but the way that the mutts manifested, I just thought that was so cool. I don't know. I just want to know more about it. I want to know more about what's happening there.
You want to be with the game makers.
I do actually. It's kind of
Yeah.
disturbing.
Yeah. Ouch.
Also,
I just want to
love
know
how-
what they're doing there, you know?
Yeah.
I love how like we had Snow when he places like he never said this in the book, but when he places, I think like the Well, I don't know if they actually did the broken crown thing in the movie, and I
No.
wish they
And
did. But I
That
love
would have been
that.
great.
I love that they had Snow recognize Katniss's pin, because it's like,
Yes.
especially when you know
Yes.
like the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, like and it's just like, yeah, that's like very like nice. I think he said pretty or nice, like pin
Mhm.
you have there.
What
And
a
then, like,
lovely
Katniss was like,
pin.
was that like
What a
Katniss is
lovely
really funny is
pin.
that like Katniss didn't even have a strong attachment to the pen either when she was in there. Like she always forgot it was there until like
Yes,
Drew
she
pointed it
forgets
out.
about it all the
Yes.
time.
Honestly, I
Trying
don't
to
think took
give
on
it away.
I don't even think it took on any significance for her
No.
personally until I think Catching Fire when she realized it was from Maisie Donner. I feel like
Right.
at that point. Because I feel like
Yeah.
up until then it was kind of just like, oh, it's like this pen or whatever.
She
Like
forgot
here
about
it
But
it
is.
yeah,
all
she
the
just kept
time.
on like remembering it as an afterthought of being like,
She
oh yeah,
remembered
my
it like
pin.
in
Rue
character.
mentioned it
It
because of the
solidified her
importance of the
friendship
She
with
kept on trying to
Madge.
give that thing away. Like she could
But like it
not get rid of
solidified her
it.
friendship with Madge. But like I feel like other than that, like she was just like, oh, it's there. And then when she finally was like taking like that on. But I thought that was so funny.
Yeah. Do we think that the pin might represent a little bit like how she sees her significance?
How you mean like her relationship with the
Ooh,
pin and constantly forgetting
Yes.
about it?
Yes,
that is
as
such
seeing
a
it
good
as like an
thought.
afterthought, like
Absolutely.
she leaves it on her mom's dress when they're in the train, and like someone else has to like bring it back, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember this for you because she left it behind. She's left herself behind in District 12, but someone else brings it back to her. I think Cinna
Yes.
turns her into
Like-
the girl on fire.
Exactly.
It's like she's
So
just
good.
trying to get rid of it. She's like, no hope, just get rid of it.
Exactly.
Like,
I will
uh-huh.
surrender myself for you. This is for you. Then in the Catching Fire, which I know we're not talking about, but then people get other gold mementos. She's starting to build more networks and connections.
The bread with Bonnie and Twill. Bread! Oh, I love that.
And then when
bread
she
symbol.
finally accepts her role as Mockingjay, then she understands the significance of the pin.
Yeah. I also like too like her like interactions with Cinna were so well done in the movie because like they're brief, but especially that conversation before she's going out into the interviews. I feel like we also got to see a lot of like Katniss's personality that was like within her inner like within like the dialogue she has in the book that takes place like within her mind. I feel like that also got to come through.
Yeah.
She was like, yeah, but I'm not even good at like talking to people and making friends. Like I don't like, know how to do that.
Yeah.
And then like I think like Cinna like reassuring her. I think they really did a really good job with that.
They were so
I
great
love their
together.
interactions.
Do you think I can say my thing in 8 minutes?
Oh shoot. I just want to add my one last thing is that I really like the ending. I like the way that they like wrapped it up.
Yeah.
I just because in the book it's great for a book, but that ending does not translate well to film
Mhm.
personally in my opinion.
Yes.
So I liked how they did it.
Yeah.
And I'm done.
You go. I want to loop back to that later, so you go.
Okay.
Okay. Mine is obviously Cato's monologue. I also have more notes that I'm just gonna read because at 1 a.m. I was feeling very righty. Throughout the entire series, the career tributes are deified in the population of the tributes in the deleted scene that Seneca Crane has with Snow. They cut that scene out just very slightly, which is we're always building up 1 and 2. So they have like a really clear advantage of training from their youth. They're coming from richer districts, which means they not only have better living conditions, but are also generally better fed. I have this really long thing about food, but I cut it out because it's not really important. The monologue is this perfect representation of the realization that the careers are just like other tributes and that they're still slaves to the capital, whether it be as a peacekeeper, because that is where most of the propaganda is going to in the career districts, more specifically in 2, which you know how I feel about District 2, or as like a piece of entertainment in killing other children until they themselves and their sense of self is killed in the games. I love that monologue so much. It's so good. And why I think it was changed or why I think it was added was for 2 reasons. It was the universal realization of the vocalization of Cato being another tribute and not like the actual enemy, unlike the capital. But also from like more of like a rating perspective and to keep it PG-13, because in the book, it goes on quite literally the entire night of Cato's suffering, of him being eaten alive by the mutts. And you could barely get a mercy kill in because of the location of where that was happening and because of the armor that he had on. And it was just so it was so gross to read. Like it just went on
That whole it went
then
on forever. And then like I love that they still were able to kind of keep, like, he literally like begged, like, please, and they still kept that within like the film, but like
no, it
idea
didn't
that,
go
like,
on all
too, like,
night.
her shooting the arrow, wow, her shooting the arrow was specifically out of pity and not vengeance, which was just like that really like markedly like different sort of, I think, like motivations too.
And
so good,
that arrow that was used in the book ended up saving 2 lives, but it did not save an appendage, which was which was the arrow that was used, that Katniss used for Peeta for the tourniquet of his leg, and ended up using it to kill Cato as mercy killing.
I did want to add, in regards to his armor, I just thought like that was something that they did leave out of the books, unfortunately, but it was so interesting that it was most likely armor he specifically requested to protect him from Katniss. And then the only thing that could have saved him or provided some sort of mercy was, in fact, Katniss. He ended up like protecting himself from the very thing that could have helped him.
Well, I think like Katniss, but also like Thresh, right? Because like, is that how we're? Because they don't really say how Thresh died, but like I guess like we imagine that there was definitely a showdown between them.
I think
and
she implies that she thinks Cato killed him.
Yeah, and that like Cato is like having the armor that would like definitely explain part of it.
It's also like a very District 2 sort of feast thing, because again, District 2 is the creation, culmination, and the success of the peacekeepers. So if you're not going to be having a continued life in the stone quarries, then you're going to go into and become a peacekeeper. So that already created his own need to satisfy the capital in being another pawn. Yeah, I love District 2. I find District 2 to be incredibly fascinating, as you all know, because it is a district that I feel like is so divided from the rest of the country, because it was the only one that was so morphed after the Dark Days and the end of the rebellion, because it originally was just stone quarries and masonry, but after that it was the creation of the peacekeepers with the destruction of District 13. Like that is an entire district that is shaped so differently because of the war, and like we don't see any of that. The only thing that we see is Lime as someone from the quarries who is a victor, but she's the only one that we ever see. Everyone else is very much indoctrinated into the peacekeeper propaganda, or at least being warriors and thinking of it as something of an honor. And Abaria, I feel like, is very loose on that sense. Brutus is very much drinking that Kool-Aid, though, or at least the Morphling. All right, we did it, kids. Round of applause, everyone. Everyone say bye.
Bye.
I will link your ats in the end. Quinn, I know you're waving.
Podcast.
Follow the
waving.
podcast.
Podcast is so good.
Thanks.